All right, welcome back. It's another Saturday live on our Black Media Network with the Watch Dogs, and we have a special guest today. We don't have Julius with us, but we do have Shantae. And Shantae, if you could tell them who you are, and then I'll talk about what our topic is for the noon hour.
I am Shantae McLaughlin. I also host the show here on the Our Black Media Network called Unjust, which airs every Wednesday night at 9 p.m.
All right, and so today, Shantae, what I wanted to talk about, and we may have some others join us, but throughout the nation, we see our Black communities being not held to the same level of regard as other communities. And so what I mean by that, we see this system of regentrification, which for those who don't understand what that means, it's allowing our Black communities to be riddled with crime, to disregard our housing project areas, and so letting them to become torn down because they haven't been attended to, allowing crime to run rampant. And so we see that part. We also see where sometimes we are being pitted against one another, as Dr. Jamal Touré will talk about, where there's a lot of times the oppressor or in a lot of instances, those who try to take over our communities will pit us against one another. And so those are just two examples of how our communities are being disregarded. We can go on and on and on with this. Even in the school systems, we see that sometimes our children are not allowed the same access to resources, or schools in their neighborhoods are not given the same resources, or this new idea of charter schools, in which in my mind is a new way to segregate education. And I mean, what I mean by that is you have these wonderful charter schools for those who have higher income. So the talented 10 Black folk who think they're greater than the others, and the white folk will put their children in the charter schools, and then the public schools become secondary and less than. And so those are just a lot of pieces that, where we could do better in our communities. I just wanted to start with that kind of a framework as we talk about today's topic. So what are your thoughts on all of that?
So, my thoughts on charter school versus public schools is, first of all, the public schools serve as the school to prison pipeline. So I think the reason why they segregate or through socioeconomic status is they're looking at who can afford the haves and the have-nots. And I see that in certain things, like the fact that my children go to public school and
Hmm.
they wear uniforms, and my kindergartner has been taught to walk with his hands behind his back, holding his hands, and I'm like, "What is this?" And he's like, "This is how we go to the bathroom."
Hmm.
And there's no one objecting to any of this. And when it comes to certain other conversations, such as gentrification, one thing that people don't look at is when you start having Caucasian people of European descent move into the neighborhood, it impacts the property value. For whatever reason, in a Caucasian neighborhood, the property value is usually higher than a Black neighborhood. So, in saying that, the schools get their funding from property taxes. So when the houses are taxed more than, or if people are paying, homeowners pay more into property taxes, that money is what they also utilize for the schools. And the prisons and jails, the county jails, is how they fund the schools, the building itself. And so when you look at having a neighborhood that's riddled with crime and uninvolved parents and things like that, and now you're talking about PTA and PTO, how do you engage in that conversation when you may have a parent who only has a third grade education? And now you're asking this parent who works 2 and 3 jobs just to keep a meal on the table to be able to come and volunteer at a school to support and assist all of these children when they're struggling to do it with their one or however many more.
Right, right. And for the sake of making this a much broader conversation, I want to, we have issues in all of our communities, especially in the city of Atlanta. Charleston is an example of another area that's kind of facing some issues. It's the city of Savannah as well. I want to paint a picture for our viewers, and viewers, I want you to engage in this conversation and share your comments and questions. But let's say you have an institution of higher education, right? An urban institution. You have development that's in a nice area of town, and you have a housing project. And so, common sense to me, and at least I saw this in my eyes, is that when you have all these recipes, you book in the housing project with all this new development and these new nice things. I don't understand why we as a community don't see the writing on the wall, and that housing project is likely going to be gone in a matter of time.
Right.
I saw it in Athens, Georgia, with Bethel Homes. I've seen a number of communities. I saw it in Atlanta. We've got to make sure that, and I get it. I get it. We all want nice things. However, the displacement of people who happen to be people of color or indigenous people has been a history of this country for a long time. How do we avoid that, or how do we educate our people so that we're not in these situations time at the time? Because history has repeated itself for decades.
So at least I'm not sure about how the system works in Savannah, although I grew up in Savannah. Here in Atlanta, we also have NPUs, which are the neighborhood planning units. And people don't factor in neighborhood association. They think that it's like the equivalence of homeowners association, and it's not. It's two totally different things. When a building goes up in your neighborhood planning unit or area, you as a citizen, just by attending these NPU meetings, they usually take place once a month, you now have the right to say, hey, we don't want this new bar or liquor store in our community. Or Robert Ray's has been there for the last 50 years. We want to keep his liquor store. We just don't want to bring in the Tay store, whatever
Mhm.
the store names are. But
Right.
you as a citizen you have that power. And I think that, I'm a firm believer in public policy. I think that for the everyday citizen, they can implement and impact public policy, and they're not taught that. We're not taught that as a
Right.
culture.
Right.
So we don't know that before gentrification happens, they actually have meetings in the NPUs about this housing development wants to come in, and they want, in your $100,000 neighborhood, they want to build $400,000 homes. That's a sign of gentrification happening.
Right.
And you only have, on a good day, 20 people in the community who actually come out to these meetings. So if you only have 20 people out of the entire community voting or not voting, then when gentrification happens, don't start screaming gentrification, gentrification. And if you don't have the knowledge and the information, that's one thing. But with the knowledge and information, we have to start being accountable. Like I've had some issues with my apartment complex, and I report everything to corporate. I'm taking it to the courts. Like, I'm taking pictures, because I feel like I pay way too much in rent to deal with the situations that I'm having. And
Hmm.
so to even progress that mindset to ownership, like what I'm paying on rent, I really should pay in home ownership.
Right.
And when you rent in an apartment complex, you have to look at how many other people are paying that amount. That amount goes into the taxes, that amount goes into what these kids are being able to receive in school as far as the services and the resources. So it all works together. And I
Hmm.
think that when we stop being silos and acting as if we exist on these islands alone, and we start being more community oriented and think of ourselves as a community, I am my brother, I am my sister's keeper. And I hope that I have a brother and a sister who, they keep me and watch my back too. So it's like when we start thinking more like that, then I believe that's when we allow for systemic change. But until we get systemic change and we start impacting public policy, we're going to just keep engaging in conversations like this.
No, and I agree with you. The sad thing about it is we'll have people that become that raised to these positions of authority, such as a Kasim Reed and Stacey Abrams is vying for the governorship. What strikes me as bothersome with those types of individuals, not Stacey necessarily, but here in Savannah, we have a number of African Americans that sit on very powerful commission seats, Metropolitan Planning Commission, and all that city council. And they are supposed to advocate for all of us, for every citizen, not just black citizens. And I get that. However, what I do have a problem with Kasim Reeds of the world is that when you get in these positions of authority, you lean into the developers. You lean into making sure the developers and the rich have more, and you forget about the folks that look like you on Pine Street that all they needed was a resource, but you ran them away.
Right.
We got to change that model. We got to change that model. It bothers me because at the end of the day, where are the grants? And honestly, this is a question I'm going to ask for the state of Georgia, especially here in the city of Savannah. How many other developers in that equation are developers that look like us, that are black developers or minority developers? How
So
many black developers are benefiting from these contracts and all this money?
So I've actually worked with the Black Female Development Association. I think I've worked with a little bit of everybody at some point in my life in my 43 years. But what was interesting is when you have a contract, half of the time when you get a contract, you're supposed to partner with a minority business. So they created that, especially through the splash funds. You're supposed to have a minority partner. Now, they had languaging problems at some point because a white woman is also considered a minority by being a woman. And so what I found is when you have the Caucasian male partner with a black woman, usually because black people don't understand the contract side, they may go get a $30 million contract and chump her off $100,000 to be able to do her portion, when really the contract stated that she's supposed to receive $5 million. But instead of being like, wait a minute, I'm supposed to get $5 million, they're like, oh, thank you, boss, thank you, master, for this 100,000. And that ends up being the problem because we don't know where our resources are located to be able to write contracts, to be able to bid for contracts. You can go through SCORE and learn. Lakeisha was my mentor at SCORE, teaching me about writing contracts. And Georgia Tech has a program that will teach you about contracts at no cost. So it's like we really don't have an excuse. And then people think they don't have the collateral because if you bid on a $10 million contract, it usually requires 5%. Now, that sounds like a lot, but it's not on the overall bid. And 5%, you can if you can show you're a homeowner, if you can show that you own any of your materials such as a dump truck or any of those kinds of things, it's like that can count as your 5%. It doesn't have to be liquid. And people hear 5% and they think that they have to be liquid. What's that? 5% of 10 million, 5% of a million is what?
Yeah, I go get daddy. He's good at math.
50,000, and you can put this stuff on credit cards, you can utilize lines of credit, and you can go get a bond. You can go straight through the Department of Labor, and you can also take the contract and show there's different equity companies, and you can also go to equipment leasing companies and show, look, I have a contract. I just need equipment so that I can win this contract. And I mean, there's so many ways to do it. It's called creative financing, and it happens every day. But people don't know about creative financing. So they don't know that it's even a conversation that most engage in.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think part of
that's really just saying when it comes to the Black people being involved in the contract business. And then let me just say this piece. I think the other part is we have business mistaken. We have it like we're so accustomed to the mom and pop store that sat on the corner for the last 30 to 40 years. And the reason why a lot of other cultures excel in business and we stay stuck is because we create businesses to be employees. We don't create businesses to be able to tour the world, to travel, to have a laptop, not even laptop lifestyle, just to have a free lifestyle where we just check in and check out. We create businesses that we have to micromanage, where we have to show up every day like we're employees, not where our business is self-sustaining and scalable.
So what you're,
We
yeah, and I love what you're saying.
we
And
think that
that
when you
to me,
hire someone, that makes it scalable, and there's a
right.
difference between business growth and development and a business being scalable and viable.
Yeah, what you're talking about is the local corner gas station versus the Boeing. You know, I think we can do, and we're seeing a little bit more of that. And I could, a lot of times I think the natural causes for me are many of us to talk about the impact of the past, but I want to talk more about the future and how we change that. Here's a basic thing we've got to do as our community. What you talked about, all the information you talked about requires one essential skill that most of us can do, but we don't do. That's read. It's in the
Right,
fine print. We've got to change our mindset. What I've noticed with our youth and many of us in our community is that we want the success, but we don't want to necessarily put in the work to get to the success.
right.
That means taking time to, instead of going out to the club or instead of doing this, take the time to read the information, go get the information, do the research. If you don't do that, it's not going to fall in your lap. And a lot of people gonna get mad about what I'm saying now. It's okay to pray about it, but prayer without work is emptiness. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? A lot of people want to pray and think it's gonna fall in our lap. Ain't nothing gonna fall. Nothing in this world is for free. God will give you the vision, but you got to use the pencil, paint, pen, and eyes and ears and hands to make it happen.
I also believe sometimes you have to be still,
Mm-hmm.
and divert your attention and your energy elsewhere. Like when I am going on 1,000 and nothing's moving, then usually it's a chance for me to look at my own energy and see what's showing up, because
Mm-hmm.
everything that we need is always here. There's nothing missing. You can't have a vision without having provision. So it's like sometimes it's like, okay, Shantae, you haven't had a new contract and you've been looking for a new contract. How about you take the time and clean out your inbox? And when you clean out your inbox in your email, you might find some different contacts or some resources or a conversation that you missed. How about you take the time and actually clean your desk? How about you take the time and clean your sunroom where you work? You've been in my sunroom. I got boxes and, things like that. I haven't even unpacked. So
Yeah.
it's like, if you want something, we have it that you have to just go, 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 go. It's no different than a relationship. Ain't nobody want nobody extra thirsty. And you want someone who shows attention. So it's like the combination of the two. So it's like, if you are looking for something, just prepare yourself for it. I think too often we want what we want and we're not prepared for what we really are asking God for. And the reason why we haven't received it is because there's a gap in who we are and who we're being today and what we're asking God for. And you have to be prepared to be that person. You
I agree.
can't say, oh, I think I should get a government contract when all you have is an EIN. You don't have it Dun and Bradstreet, and now Dun and Bradstreet has changed. That's not even a requirement for you to have a small business or to have government contracts. They've changed the whole language. You're not set up as a minority business or a disadvantaged business. You don't know what a hub zone is. You don't know what a hot zone is. So it's like, but you want a government contract. You don't know what SAM.gov is. And I'm saying a lot of things where somebody might go and do the research and find out what these things are and the impact that it can have on their business. But a lot of people will say, oh, well, that was some good information, and they don't follow up and they don't do anything. And then they're like, it's the white man's fault that I ain't get that contract. No, it's your fault.
Right. Because you didn't want to put in the work.
And when we need to have some accountability in our own communities, we make it the white man when they kill us, but we don't sit there and rally and protest when we kill each other. So we got to have some accountability in our own community. We got to start working together. The Asians, what makes them different is they work together. What makes the Middle Easterns different is they work together. What makes the white people different is they work together. We would rather fight each other and get mad. Well, he had on glasses and I ain't have on glasses, so I ain't want to work with him. So what? Get over yourself. Get over your foolish pride. Get over your all of it.
Well, and I agree. And I think but you know what? And what you're talking about too is a value added values and standard within a culture that I think is missing in in my opinion, is missing in the Black culture. One of the things I talk about often, I have before, is the idea of Christianity and how Christianity has crippled our culture. And the reality and disreality of that whole thing. I'm not going to go there, so folks don't have to get pissed off. But I'll say
I'll
this much:
go there.
hold on,
Religion.
hold on.
Okay.
But I had a chance, and this is a shout out to people. I had a chance as a part of an experience many years ago as a diplomat for the United States. I visited two Muslim majority countries, Sarajevo and Kuala Lumpur. And those are Muslim majority countries. And the one thing I will say about Islam is this: nothing occurs without consulting the Quran. That is a very culturalistic way of thinking versus a very individualistic way of thinking, right? And so I wonder if we had a certain value, if we, and I'm not saying we need to be Islam. I myself am Catholic. What I'm saying is how that has shown up and hurt our community, and where do we find this shared set of values?
So it's interesting because when you said I myself as Catholic, I made faces. And then I remember this preacher the other day. I was at their house and I said, I was raised Pentecostal. And they're like, you Pentecostal? I said, yeah, me with my cleavage out, Pentecostal and everything.
You got the little shirt to put over yourself.
Yep. You got to put the prayer cloth over you before you pass out with the Holy Ghost. Right. Yep. So, I think that you just raised a valid point. But the other point is so often we hide behind religion. So whether we are exploring the Muslim faith, the Buddhist faith, the Tao, Christianity, whatever you choose to believe, I always stand by your religion is what you believe in. And even atheists believe. That is my thought. And so it's like, do we make the Wiccas wrong when we know that trees and nature have healing properties? Do we make Tao wrong when I've been to the Tao temples and experienced the Tao, and it was the most beautiful thing that I've ever experienced in my life? Do we make the Buddhists wrong? Like, we spend so much time in morality that we forget how often we're judging. And almost all religions have something said about judgment, and we don't focus on the principles of the religion. We just focus on the dogma aspect. And I had a woman recently, an older woman, say to me, are you going to go to heaven? I said, I don't know. I'm not dead. She said,
oh, you done started some mess. She'll throw them little green Bibles at your house.
I know. She said, have you, do you believe in Jesus Christ? I said, actually, I do. Sometimes, depending on what day you ask me. And she said, I said, listen, my sins ain't going to get you into hell, and your Savior ain't going to get me into heaven. And your sins aren't going to get me into hell, and my salvation isn't going to get you into heaven. All you need to know is I love God, period. And I feel like that's it. And I don't have to explain myself. And this lady was like 80 years old. And people will say, oh, that's so disrespectful. You shouldn't disrespect your elders. But a lot of this old way of thinking and teachings have gotten us to where we are. Like, we were planning a rally in a different state, and the preacher gonna say, oh, are y'all saved and sanctified or something? He said. And I was like, yes, we're saved. Well, if you're saved, you know that rallying and protesting, that's not of God. You got to let God fight your battles. I was like, did you see what happened? And from there, he was like, that's why y'all children in the street. I said, and you know how I feel. Don't go there with my children unless you want to see that other side of me. And so I'm saying all of this to say, so often the church has become an argument. The church has become an area of debate, not the religion. The religion is what we have that holds us to spirituality. It's like reading a good book and having different interpretations of that good book and being able to share it in a book study. In a book study, everyone respects the conversation as just that, a conversation. But so often with religion, we start arguing over the dogma. So in our culture and in our society, we have a religious sect that was passed down from slavery. It was what kept the slaves in
Yeah.
bondage.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So
That's where
often
this master concept comes from. People don't realize that. When you say master, it makes me cringe sometimes. Like, y'all don't even know what you're talking about. So I'm not going there, but it's like, think about what's coming out your mouth.
and
Yeah, you
I
know.
identify as non-denominational.
Yeah. Yeah. It is what it is. And
You
and
know,
and if I could, what you talked about goes back to when Dr. King was advocating. I hate the word fighting. When he was advocating and how the other preachers were like, "No, Martin, be quiet." What if Martin had been quiet? Where would we be today? But also, let's add this: you had Malcolm, who was of the Nation of Islam, and you had Martin. Both were very, in a way, nonviolent, but you had both and. What I think sometimes is we don't, as a culture, want to get the both and. We want to be right, wrong.
right, right. And we are taught that being direct is aggressive behavior because Malcolm X took a very confrontational, direct approach to all of it.
Mm-hmm.
Like by any means necessary. We don't have to tolerate this. This is what we want. This is what we don't want. Martin Luther King took a passive aggressive approach. You know,
Mm-hmm.
we're gonna pray, we're gonna sit, and we are gonna demonstrate, and we're gonna protest, and we're gonna walk. And I'm not saying either approach was bad or wrong or right or wrong because we're where we are. But I do believe that it's wrong in the world of morality that here it is, it's 2022, and we are still sitting and rallying and taking peaceful approaches. But the only demonstrations that actually got attention was when George Floyd had a knee on his throat, which was the white man saying to us by any means necessary. And when they were in Atlanta and they flipped over those police cars. And so that was more of a Malcolm X approach. Me, myself, with my 20-year terroristic dead docketed charge, I believe in the Malcolm X approach. You know, I think
Both and. I really do. I think sometimes, and what bothers me is, well, it doesn't bother me,
people just need to
but
be
you
punched
can't,
around.
folk, and this is a big cultural thing that I want our communities to hear. You can't keep pushing somebody in a corner and think they're gonna be all nice and fluffy with you. They're gonna flip your car, and you gotta understand that. So what I'm saying is, for 400 plus years, you want to oppress the culture, and now they want to jump up on you. What you surprised about? I ain't honestly. The one thing I will say is this: the only thing I dislike for our communities is when they go tear up their own neighborhoods. Go tear up the city hall. Now I ain't telling you that. I'm saying that if you gonna react, no, hold on, let me clarify.
Okay.
If you gonna go act the fool on somebody, go act the fool on the oppressor. Now I ain't telling you to do nothing bad, but if that's what you feel in your spirit, then don't tear up your own stuff. If you make me mad, I ain't gonna tear up my car and tear you up.
Well, here's the deal about that though. Half of the time, these houses, unless you're in your granny's house, it's still owned by the bank, and the bank owners don't look like us. And then these buildings that's in our neighborhoods, they have insurance, and guess what? They're usually people who don't look like us. Well, they might look a little similar to us, especially you, Robert, but they don't usually look like us.
Yeah, you're just gonna stop this. You're just gonna
get a little Drake on TV. Julia said, "Have your butt over there." Now, but this is the thing. Seriously, we've become the reasons why, because people always want to know, well, why do they have to loot and riot? You didn't care about the Black Lives Matter movement until you saw the looting and rioting. Right. You didn't care about the civil rights movement with Dr. King. Everybody knows, if you've ever watched any of the historic videos, until the white preachers came from the North and started getting assaulted and beaten live on TV, that's when white America started caring about the movement. So we're here in 2022 in a movement all over the nation, all over the world. And they don't understand why there's the looting, the rioting, the burning of buildings, the flipping of cars. Guess what? You care more about a vehicle than you do a human being, all because of the color of their skin. And then you make us the quote unquote ignorant ones and the racist ones, when really you need to check how your feelings are about the fact that your dog that you kiss in the mouth every day means more to you than seeing a black man with a knee on his throat.
let me bring this up. I know we're random, y'all, somewhat, but this is what gets me too in our community. We allow the system, all systems, and there are multiple systems to just denigrate us. We talked about this stuff, and it makes me so angry. So when it comes to drug use, drug is drug, and we have been programmed to believe that this drug is bad, but this drug, because it makes you feel good, is really good. So what I mean by that, why are many of our black males today and black sisters and whoever sitting in jail over marijuana, cocaine, whatever charges? At the end of the day, my thought is this: stop prosecuting people for nonviolent crimes. So if you want to go out there and get geeked up, as long as you ain't hurt nobody, go kill yourself. That ain't got to do with us. But yet you will let a white man go sell out opioids and more dangerous drugs and give those out and kill people, but that's okay.
It's a lesser sentence. You'll let people sit there and take some of those alternatives to heroin so that they can actually go through what's it called? Rehab, so that they don't experience extreme withdrawals. Now, pull up on one of us and let some of those drugs be found in our bloodstream. We're going to prison. We're going to prison for DUIs. We're going to prison for if we get caught with it on us, we're going to prison for having trafficking if you're on a highway, the right to intent to distribute, for possession. They charging us with everything. Now, let somebody that don't look like us have some of these drugs on them or in their bloodstream. So, the laws are not for us. Prisons were designed for us, but the laws were not. I'm getting my master's degree at Morehouse School of Medicine and master's in administrative justice involved care. And I only say that because one of my books is in front of me, and it's actually called Public Health Behind Bars. And in the book, some of the conversations, one of my assignments this week was to look at chronic and acute illnesses and the impact of the prison system on people being able to receive treatment. So you mean to tell me that I'm strung out on coke or crack and I go to prison when 33% of people who are incarcerated live with a mental health diagnosis, and drug addiction is classified under mental health? So we're expecting a system that was only designed to house us.
Yep. For free labor.
Profit off of it. Well, this is the part that I didn't realize. Do you know that when you're incarcerated in one of those prisons that actually does offer work, one, you have to apply to those jobs. You're not just assigned to a detail. You have to apply and get selected. And if you have a health ailment, there is copay required. So you're making 10 cents, but you're required to pay $25 in copay. Now, $25 doesn't sound like a lot to people, but when you're making 10 cents an hour and you're already sickly, and you're trying to tell me that the prison industrial system is not modern day slavery and a violation of our 13th Amendment, but because people in there are brown and black, women and men, there are white people incarcerated, but the numbers don't make sense for the mass number.
It's seriously disproportionate. And the only reason they're incarcerated is because it's an income class barrier issue. But I just want to, slide that in.
If you are in a high socioeconomic bracket, then you are usually in a federal prison where you don't deal with those kinds of things.
Oh, no. Let's play that back out. You have the funding to make sure it doesn't happen.
Well, if it does happen and you end up in a federal prison, you can control the food. You can actually, I know people who have been in federal prison who have said, oh, when you get the rich people in prison with you, they just buy food for all of the inmates. So you're able to have bananas and papaya and pineapple and things like this, things that you normally wouldn't have because they have the funding to just go ahead and have them cook whatever they choose to eat. So it's like having their personal chefs, but in prison. So it's like there's so many breakdowns in the whole conversation of community, because I know we've danced around a lot of topics, but ultimately it's community. It goes back to communities with people of color how we're treated versus um
Well, it's,
I don't even want to say it's a us versus them. It's really an us
no,
versus
no.
us.
It's us needing to basically value our communities, our children, our way of being, and I believe that comes with a shared set of values, right? One of the things that popped in my head, I'm always looking at ways that what is the theme across all of this, and it comes to cultural pollution. It's like environmental pollution. You know, with all of these different gases and fumes going into the air, we have an environment that now is polluted that we breathe in, right? We now have a cultural pollution issue, and that we've got to, as a community, culture, come together collectively to realize how do we get these bad toxins, these demons, these evil things, these bad practices out of our culture. And what I mean by that is we got to put people in office, for example, to push back on these laws and these archaic way of beings. We got to put people in these churches who value the upliftment of our culture and not the filling of their pocket. We've got to put people in community organizing spaces so that we save our Yammer Crawls and our Bethel homes and not sell them to the master. That's what I mean. We got to start filtering out and fixing this cultural pollution.
I agree. I agree. And even in saving the Yamacraws, everyone knows if you've ever been to Savannah, Yamacraw has never been known for having the best reputation. However, it is a building structure that can be revitalized and repurposed. They can add in a community center and keep the cost of living exactly where it's at, because they have all of these jails and prisons where they leverage the funds to be able to provide funding for new libraries, to be able to do the infrastructure development of the same project, for better choice of words. So why is it that they wouldn't just regentrify Yamacraw? It's just remodeling. How many people have lived through a remodel of their home? It's
Mm,
remodeling. You don't have to displace these individuals and the
right.
community. You don't have to raise their rent. You can keep rent right where it's at. It's called remodeling. And going
Well,
back to the question
yeah,
that
go
you
ahead.
asked earlier about the grants, you were talking when we were talking about the contracts. Um, I sit on the client advisory council for the homeless here in Atlanta for one of the organizations. And recently at our meeting last month, we were discussing a law, Senate Bill 535, where they're trying to create encampments for the homeless. So it's a way of criminalizing the poor and criminalizing poverty. So it looks like those same ICE camps that we talk about, but we don't do anything about it because it doesn't hit close enough to home. It's now hitting close to home. So if you're classified as homeless, they will throw you in an encampment. They're trying to make this a law all across the US. And so when you look at the Yamacross or any of the projects there, the Perry homes, the Grady homes, the Capitol
Hmm.
homes, any of those places where people have been displaced, what they're trying to do is, if you are homeless, like I said, you'll be in an encampment. But if they're going to be building affordable housing in the same area, if it's supposedly affordable housing, why would you have to leave? What's the need for gentrification if it's quote unquote affordable housing? And if it's affordable housing, then why is it that we can't have equity in wages, not equality, not livable wages, equity in wages? Because if I have student loan debt and I'm a black woman, and if I go to work in corporate America and they're only going to pay me $30 an hour, high peak, right? But then you have a black male who's probably only going to get paid $20 an hour, because if you do the data, if you pull up data and statistics, the black male is the most underpaid class in America. So if we're arguing and advocating um, for us to have livable wages, define livable wages. We need equity in wages. We need Atlanta's wages not to be the same as if it were Savannah, because the cost of living isn't the same. Well, Savannah's expensive now, and the cost
Yeah.
of living isn't quite the same. And so it's like we need equity in wages. We need wages to look at the cross-cultural dialogue, and we don't look at the culture so much. We just look at the bottom line number, and that's because we have these Republicans who don't look like us making decisions for us in a
And we
safe.
got Jesus here. I'm gonna let him chime in on all the things.
Have you tried my God? He's all right.
I I just I received a text message and I'm out here in the field, and so I said if he sent it to me, then that means he not trying to just say you might want to come on. He demanded that I come on, so that's why I did. So I understand. I understand. So like I said, I've been out here in the field. So and the conversation you said is about our communities. And
Mm-hmm.
but I would say, I think Shantae brought up an excellent point. Is about equity in wages. Now and
Mm-hmm.
see, and now I say, and see, I'm going to say this because I'm talking to Robert Bryant right now, but I'm not looking at him. Y'all know when we do that in the community, that means we're furious because I might be like, he set me up. Shantae saying what he's saying, it's a setup right now because they want me to go and say something. Now, when we talk about equity in wages, there is an institution. There's an institution, whereas Caucasian males make, I want to say, 20 to 25,000 more than black females, and black females have PhDs. The Caucasian males have only masters. African American males, they make $10,000 more than African American females, who also have PhDs. So now when you talk about equity in wages, it is more massive than what we even understand. We look at, as we say, the working poor, but I'm saying in almost all phases of this right here. When do we come about and talk about equity with regards to us? Because again, it is absolutely unfair and it's happening. And I tell folks we have to speak out on all this right here. So when I heard it, I said Robert Bryant set me up. Because see, I got to speak on that and put that out there. Because again, how can this woman, this sister, make 20 to 25,000 less than a Caucasian male who don't even have the same qualifications, have lesser qualifications than her? How can this man, this brother, he still make less than the Caucasian male also, but then he still also has greater qualifications than the Caucasian male,
Yeah.
but then he's making more than the sister. That's a problem. And we need to
Yeah.
be vocal. That's what I said. And the people who we got, who we let, are we allowed to get in office? Sometimes we allow them to get in office when we don't go and vote. We don't stand up
Right.
and speak out. We allow them to get in office. And then so they're able to push their madness.
Yeah. And if I could, Shantae, let me go back to this idea of cultural pollution. So Ray, we were talking and what I came up with this idea of it's just like environmental pollution where we clean up the air. We've got to do a cleaning of the culture. And that means a cultural pollution. I mean, get rid of cultural pollution and fix that. And that means, part of it is what you said, getting people out of office who are not advocating in a correct way, getting pastors who are going to pastor and not fill their pockets. And what was the third thing, Shantae, is basically centering ourselves like around a set of values. And so we've got to start this process of fixing this cultural pollution.
And and that's interesting. Also, one of the things that I have shared with folks in my classes and when I've spoken around, when I do presentations, I tell people, when you understand your history and your culture, your self-esteem is like that. And then later on, I began to evolve and go and say, if you have a proper understanding of your culture, your self-esteem is like that. But that's having a proper understanding of your culture. And so either one of those help you to excel. But when you do not, yes, you become damaged. And then what happens is that the people who are in position to do something and to work on your behalf refuse to do so. And I often tell folks that what happens, that we have people who feel beholden to other people because they think other people are greater than them. What I realized that I look at my group of people, I understand how great each one of you are. And I understand how magnificent you are. I don't have no proximity bias. So I look at my group, I look at my set of people that are with me. I look and see the greatness in you first before I look at somebody else. Then others, I can go and look at their greatness. But then guess what? Some of us, we don't look at the greatness that's right there with us. We don't look at the people in our own households, in our own neighborhoods, in our churches, in our schools who are with us, who grew up with us. We don't see the value of them. So we look at somebody else and think somebody else is greater than them. And sometimes those people who they think greater than them are people who are not even of their own ethnicity or their racial identity group. And so I tell folks that's a problem. And so we see that in leadership, that they're going to think and listen to what somebody else says as opposed to listen to what Shantae may say or what a Robert may say, what a Jamal would say. Because Jamal don't know nothing. He from the same school I went to. Robert went to the same church I went to. Shantae went to from the same neighborhood as me. And I'm like saying, so that cultural pollution you're talking about, that is absolutely real. And it is devastating on us, especially when we're not getting in positions of leadership and we are ineffective in those positions. Because again, psychologically, our self-esteem is low.
You know, to chime into what you just said, well, first of all, I'm from the south side of Savannah, BC, before crime. So, but we fall into assimilation.
I love that.
Emulation and assimilation. I think that ends up being the challenge. You know, we live by the white is right. I was actually in a meeting one day where they were talking to me about my language. And Robert met me when I first moved from Michigan. And, you know, I was the only Black in my school outside of my relatives. So my dialect was a lot different. There was no culture in it. There was no soul to my voice. And so I say all of that to say we fall into this conversation that you have to speak this way. You have to speak as if your name is Becky, not Shantae. You know, we do all of this bull. And the reality is they know that we're Black. They're not going to accept us any more or less if we assimilate. We have to remember that we have a culture. But the problem is in this cultural toxicity conversation that Robert has brought up, we don't have a culture outside of our food, outside of our dress, outside of our music. As a Black person, not African American, as a Black person, you know that there is a culture. But as an African American, our culture has been diluted by the white man's culture. Even when I put on my Anne Klein, which I think this is with this African print, guess what? It's been diluted by the white man's culture. Because if we were Asian or if we were Middle Eastern, their culture would be accepted. Broken English is accepted. But because we're Black, it's called Ebonics, it's called being uneducated. You know, I can have a PhD and say ain't, or say, let me call somebody a mofo, you know. But in our culture, that is us not showing that we're educated. I don't have to show my education. Like, why do we have this thought process that the only way that we're woke is to act as if we're white? Anything else is us not understanding our true greatness or stepping into that. And really, we're just practicing servitude. We're serving a master who don't even respect us for being Black or brown. I have to say brown because my grandmother's Puerto Rican and Black. So it's like, for me to, and I got some white in me. And for me to deny any part of who I am is to deny myself. And we have to accept our culture as Black people, not as African American.
Well, it's powerful you said that. I have a friend of mine. Go ahead, Tori.
I was going to say now, what I teach, and I let people say, African culture is with us. Everything that you all do is tied to African culture. Something as simple as, I tell people this, you can see Africa around you all the time. And this is where I get on people from the continent. See, people from the continent sometimes think that Black folks here, African Americans, know that this stuff comes from Africa. I said, no, they don't know that because they taught. And see, that's what has happened. Now, when we talk about cultural competency and cultural toxicity, that's what this is all about. When I say somebody feels that somebody else is beholden, see, my scholars from third grade on up, because I tell folks this, I say, I have third graders who know more about history and culture than the so-called experts. They know more than their teachers and their parents, and they spit it out. Just like culture and history, just like I tell folks, guess what? When you go down on River Street and you go and see what those 5 young Black men did, it's based on culture. That nobody else did it. When their parents heard the same thing, grandparents heard the same thing, leaders heard the same thing. So something called a porch comes from Africa. Porches come from Africa. But how many of us know that? And what is the purpose of what's the purpose of a porch? Fellowship and communalism. I have folks who came with me, who do my journeys, who come from Chicago. When they see me do a presentation, they say, Jamal, you know what? In our subdivision, on some of our houses, we got porches on some of our houses. And we got these people who just moved up from the South. And they sit on the porch and they say, these are Black folks saying this. And we were laughing at them that they sit on the porch. And they say, guess what we're going to do? We're going to go back home now and sit on our porches too. I said, that goes back to Africa. And then I have somebody in my class who's from Nigeria. He says, oh, he's right. Because in our community, And when they had to discuss some things, they sit underneath the veranda, the porch. So that's something right there. Then with culture and history, even I shared something in my classes this week on Hilton Head Island that they would do something. And some of y'all might not realize this. Some of your relatives, when they have these odd names or these funny nicknames, you ain't understanding what that is tied to. That's tied to African tradition. And what that sometimes indicated in some of our families, that it was a child that had died in the family. Why did they go and do that? But get the next child a funny name or that nickname is because to protect the child, the next children from the death angel. Now guess what? My people on Tuesday heard that. Then on Thursday, I gave them some information. They talk about the Hausa people. I gave them from the Hausa people in northern Nigeria. So a child name translates to child on the rubbish, basically on the trash heap. And why did they do that? They said that they protect the next set of children because one of the children had died, and they want the evil spirits to think that nobody loves the child, but in fact the child is loved, and the evil spirits will not bother the child, take them away. That's Africa with us. That's our tradition with us all the time. And then you talk Puerto Rico, we do the ring shout right here, but people also know Puerto Rico, the bomba. And here goes our brother just wrote. He discusses that. Understand that the bomba, ring shout, that's all our tradition. But what happened that when you got somebody in a position of power and leadership, they don't even realize, they think that some Caucasian is better than them. Whereas, like I said, I have a third grade who's going to say, that comes from Africa. And their self-esteem is just like this right here. Because now when they walk into these circles or when they're in those schools and they're trying to hit them, they're like, I know more than my teacher. And that's why I'm going to say, that's where that power comes. When you know who you are, and that's why I go. And when I say about, when I see y'all, I understand y'all greatness, because that's what didn't happen. Within your own group, you used to understand the greatness in your own group. Then you go look at other people. You don't start with other people, how they got.
But you know what? You're right. You're right.
You start right at home.
And you're right about that, Teray, because Shante will tell you, and she and I do this all the time. If it's something that comes up, I ain't thinking about nobody but somebody who look like me. So Shante tell you a minute, oh, Shante, I got this idea. I mean, unjust. That's how we got the unjust. Shante had this idea, say, hold on, I got Julius Hall. I don't care what you say. And honestly, I don't care what you say about Shante. I don't care that Shante choke a kids. I'm kidding. You can't tell me nothing about Julius Hall. You can't tell me nothing about my people, because guess what? I can tell you one thing they didn't do. They didn't oppress nobody.
Yeah. My son is like 5'10".
And beats her off. Yo, she gets beat by her children.
He might get choked out.
And then
no, I'm just kidding. I would end on a fun note.
Gloria Steinem said something. Gloria Steinem said this right here. Gloria Steinem said that she's able to look at other groups of people and criticize and critique them. But when it comes to people within her own group, she has a problem critiquing them. She has a problem going. But now, if you ain't part of her group, she ain't got no problem criticizing you, attacking you. This is what Gloria Steinem said. And I tell people, I say, and people supported her, but they're not realizing she letting me know I'm going to attack people from another group easily. But within my own social circle, I have a problem with regard to exposing them. But here goes some of us. We in turn, we get bit by that rabid dog like that, and then we go start biting our own people. We don't even go after the ones who are the real oppressors and bite them instead. So that's why I tell folks, that is something, that's a part of their psychology. Even though you said, Rob, I don't care what you say about Shante, about Julius, how Julius still owe me some money and stuff like that. But I'm still going to support Julius because they do the same thing all the time, but then they make you feel bad about
it. Hey, look at, and we're going on this. Look at Trump now. Trump is going to grab people by the thing and stolen treason, and they didn't. Y'all better get together. But with that note, I appreciate y'all coming on today. We're going to head on out. We might do part 2 of this, but I really appreciate y'all being on here, and we'll be back next week. We will be here next Saturday at noon for another show to Watch Dawgs. Y'all stay on right quick.
Yes, sir.
like this. I like that.